Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Microsoft and Xbox having the 1-2 punch for best graphics in 2024. When's the last time you thought about Xbox and best graphics? Well, Digital Foundry says that Hellblade 2 is number 2, and Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is the number 1 best graphics in 2024. Now, if you run to Digital Foundry for all of your information and your comparisons, and you believe them when they tell you what it is you want to hear, then you've got to believe them here that Indiana Jones is the best graphics on console in 2024. Something, I guess, to celebrate. But just when you think things are up, they seem to be going down. Or maybe I am just misinformed. And that's what this video is about, because I want to ask questions. I'm not a PC gamer. I'll never be a PC gamer. I hate Windows. But it seems like Microsoft is a day late and $1 short again. And the ghost of Steve Ballmer. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're old enough to remember a time before smartphones, if you're old enough to remember a time before the iPhone and then the introduction of the iPhone, you're old enough to remember Microsoft completely and totally missing the idea of mobile and then buying a phone company named Nokia to try and just buy their way into the market that they missed because of short-sightedness, and that didn't work out. And Windows as a platform, Windows as a mobile OS is gone. Never really became a thing. Microsoft missed the boat. And here we are again with Steam. Microsoft seemingly underestimating their intentions. So let's look back. Let's take a look back through history and see the arrogance or short-sightedness of Microsoft at the time. And then we'll talk about what's going on right now.
Let me ask you about the iPhone and the Zune, if I may. The Zune was getting some traction, then Steve Jobs goes to Macworld and he pulls out this iPhone. What was your first reaction when you saw that?
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine. Now, it may sell very well or not. We have our strategy. We've got great Windows mobile devices in the market today. You can get a Motorola Q phone now for $99. It's a very capable machine. It'll do music. It'll do internet. It'll do email. It'll do instant messaging. So I kind of look at that and I say, well, I like our strategy. I like it a lot.
How do you compete with that, though? He sucked out a lot of the spotlight in the last few weeks because of what happened at Macworld, not only with the iPhone, but with the new iPod. I mean, how do you compete with that, with the Zune?
Right now, well, let's take phones first.
Okay.
Right now, we're selling millions and millions and millions of phones a year. Apple is selling 0 phones a year. In 6 months, they'll have the most expensive phone by far ever in the marketplace. And let's see, what's the expression? Let's see how the competition goes. In the case of music and entertainment players, Apple absolutely has a preeminent position. We said we want to be in this market. There's a lot of reasons why there's synergy with other things that we're doing. We think we've got some unique innovations, particularly what we're doing with community, with wireless networking. And we came into the market, a market in which they're very strong. And we took, I think most estimates would say we took about 20-25% of the high end of the market. We weren't down at some of the lower price points, but for devices $249 and over, we took, let's say about 20% of the market. So I feel like we're in the game, we're driving our innovation hard, we're not the incumbent. He's the incumbent in this game, but at the end of the day, he's going to have to keep up with an agenda that we're going to drive as well.
And you still feel like you can be very competitive in that space?
Sure, absolutely.
So when you look back at that, they just couldn't envision anybody doing what they did better than they were doing at the time. They had such a dominant position that it didn't occur to them that you could subsidize the cost of a phone through the phone carriers, or that this mobile operating system that Apple was creating was going to be the dominant mobile OS going forward, and that Windows would be left essentially in the dust, stuck on PCs. Now, you flash forward to 2024, 2025, and the Steam Deck comes out. Microsoft really doesn't think about it. It's just a high-end dedicated mobile PC for a particular niche audience. But now SteamOS is being proliferated with hardware not made by Valve. So essentially, They're doing what Microsoft did with Windows way back then, putting it on everyone's machine. Steam now is saying, hey, Lenovo can use the SteamOS. And our store is now proliferated, not only with our own hardware, but all this other hardware, which is essentially what Microsoft wanted to do, and they're not doing. Now let's look at what Digital Foundry says about this, because it raises some really big concerns.
That's confusing about this topic. I'm like, wait a minute, they're both there. But that creates a problem, right? Where if they're starting to say, hey, Game Pass is now supported on SteamOS, doesn't that potentially throw a wrench in what seems to be their plans going forward for expanding Windows, right? So obviously more subscribers on Game Pass is a good thing, but Windows is kind of a critical product for Microsoft. And it feels strange, the idea of them throwing a bone to SteamOS in that way, even in, light of the This Is an Xbox campaign, it feels like it's almost setting them up for, well, what's the purpose of the Xbox sort of like side of things on this, right? In Windows, if you can just use the more streamlined SteamOS.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a weird situation right now. I'm very confused, and I think a lot of people are generally confused with the direction Microsoft's trying to go here. But maybe it is just throw all of our eggs into as many baskets as possible.
Yeah.
That does seem to be the strategy, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if Steam and Valve decide to let their SteamOS and their store, essentially their intellectual property, exist on other pieces of hardware that aren't made by Valve, Microsoft is left holding what? Because most people, it seems like most people on PC want to use that SteamOS, and the high-end portable gaming market is pretty much dominated by these devices like the Steam Deck and Lenovo's whatever it is they're coming out with. Now think about Steam is essentially in a position where no matter who creates a piece of hardware in the mobile PC space, even if it's super expensive and they don't have to incur those costs, their SteamOS and their store, well, they could just exist on that hardware. And if Microsoft just allows Game Pass to exist there, then what was the point of pushing out this mobile strategy, this everything everywhere? Because it's everything everywhere as long as you're going in through the Windows window, so to speak. But now that's threatened completely by Steam pushing their OS and their store everywhere, even on other people's devices. There's one more clip from Digital Foundry that I found very, very interesting. Let's take a look at that and we'll talk about it.
The prospects of Windows dragging you away from that are really decreasing, I think, because that seems pretty appealing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that goes back to the previous point, right, Oliver? Where it's like, now if you had a standalone unit like this as a console, you have a handheld, all SteamOS, Game Pass is suddenly supported. Where does that leave Microsoft going forward? Because everything we've been discussing with Microsoft's next generation plans hinges on it becoming more of a PC, right? And I feel like you very specifically just said what a lot of people are thinking, where that would essentially make Windows even less desirable than it currently is. So the only way to really turn that around then would be for Microsoft to make Windows actually compelling in the same way as Steam Deck, which I'm sure they would like to do and are probably attempting.
Yeah.
But whether they can actually succeed at that remains.
I mean, there
to be
is
seen.
still incompatibility issues, certainly. I don't.
That's on their side, right? Like that, if they can make the experience competitive with SteamOS, they can at least boast increased compatibility.
Now you think about Microsoft's plan to be everywhere. Well, they certainly want to be, but they want their games to make money for their ecosystem, and then they want their Windows operating system to be the one that you go through, and essentially their store to actually be something that people want to purchase things through. But now, by not really keeping your eye on your competitor in this high-end mobile PC space, Steam and Valve have essentially done what the little company Apple did, and that's just backdoor Microsoft into this mobile everything everywhere device land that we're in now. And I think the people who are looking for these handhelds, these high-end handhelds, we're not talking about the Switch here, folks. We're talking about high-end PC-compatible handhelds. Steam has essentially made Microsoft's Windows the same way that Apple made Windows irrelevant in this mobile space. And I don't think Microsoft even saw this coming. Now you think about, where does this leave PlayStation? Because PlayStation's games are on PC. They're probably going to be day and date eventually with PC, and they're also going to make their own portable device, albeit I don't think it's going to compete in that high-end space with the Steam Deck and everything else that's coming out that's, between $800 and $1,500. Most people are just going to buy that proprietary piece of hardware made by Sony and whatever OS Sony is using to just get their store on there, and you can play your PS6 games on the go, and they'll still have their games on those high-end devices if you want to play them there through the SteamOS and the Steam Store. Microsoft essentially is relegated to just being a service provider and not even be able to proliferate their own operating system again in a mobile space, with Windows being backdoored by Steam. Am I wrong in these thoughts? I would love to know, because I am not a PC gamer, but it just feels like that ghost of Steve Ballmer has haunted Microsoft for a long time, and it doesn't look like he's quite gone yet. Interested to know everyone's thoughts down there in the comment section below. I appreciate you watching the video. Think about liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.